All right, good evening, everybody. I would like to open up with a word of prayer. And while I'm praying, I don't normally ask this, but if you all could be praying for me while I get ready to deliver tonight, I'm pretty nervous about this one. And I have, since I've gotten into this room, started to experience something of a headache starting to form on the back of my head, which is very unusual. I don't normally experience that. And so either I'm really nervous about this and looking calm, cool, and collected on the outside, or tonight might be something of impactful, and I'm nervous about it. So if you all could be praying for me as we get into this, but I'd like to open up with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we come before you this evening, and first up, Lord, I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. Lord, you know that I'm nervous about this, but Lord, I want to lay this topic before you, and I hope that tonight eyes would be open, ears would be open, hearts would be open. I pray that the words that are spoken are honoring and glorifying to you, Father. And I pray that the words that are spoken tonight and the words that are heard tonight ultimately come from you, Father. And I pray that you are honored and glorified by our time that transpires here. And I pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. All right. Well, I'm seeing some faces tonight that I have not seen for a couple of weeks. So true to form, I like to start with review. What are we talking about in this series? The storms of this life. We started off in week 1 defining what these storms are. What are the storms of this life? And I keep coming back to this theme, and I keep wanting to harp on it, so apologies if you're getting tired of me reiterating the same thing over and over each week. But in my experience, and what we are delineating in this series, is that in life there are storms. That's a fact that I just kind of lob out there. And hopefully by experience, you all agree with me, or maybe not hopefully, but you at least agree that we do experience storms in this life. Now, the storms that we experience, I have broken down into 3 broad categories. There are the storms that we experience because of our sin. If we have gone and done something that violates God's moral law or is a decision that is biblically foolish, the storms that we encounter are the results of our own actions. They're the consequences of our own sin. We are not talking about those storms in this series. In the second category, we have the storms that come our way because of supernatural trials and tribulations. These are acts or storms that are brought our way because of our adversary, the devil, where we, or the persecutions of this world. We are not talking about those storms, okay? So broadly speaking, maybe as an example of the first category, we would have, I keep coming back to the example of Saul, when he had the Spirit of the Lord taken away from him and an evil spirit was sent and it tormented him. That is a consequence of his own sin that was brought on him, the storms that he experienced because of his own sin. In the second category, I would lump in the example of Job, right? Righteous man, and Satan's like, yeah, well, he only praises you because you're protecting him. Remove that protection and watch what happens. And God's like, deal. The storms that came Job's way were supernatural. Then we have the third category. And the third category is what we are focusing on in this series. These storms are the storms that come our way not because of our sin and not because of a supernatural trial or tribulation, but because we exist in a fallen world. And by existing in a fallen world, we encounter storms that come our way. Now, what's different about these storms is that these storms are not in and of themselves sinful. But how we respond to these storms can either be sinful or God-honoring. And so we started off in week 1 examining Peter walking on the water. We gave a number of other examples. And then we came back in week 2 discussing doubt. Doubt as one of the first storms that we encounter. And we're talking about specifically 3 storms, but tonight, this week, I've decided that we're actually going to cover a 4th storm, and so that's going to come for next week. The first storm that we talked about, though, was doubt, and we specifically dove deeply into Peter walking on the water. And we basically plagiarized Charles Spurgeon, one of his sermons. And what we came up with was a 2-step solution to dealing with the doubt that comes our way. The first step was to examine your doubt and determine if it is founded. Oftentimes, as Spurgeon notes, we ask for proof of what you believe in, but we never expect the same burden of proof for our doubts. Examine your doubts and determine if they even have a foundation. I'd argue most of the times they don't. The second step, though, is if your doubts are founded, we use the example of Peter walking on the water. Fix your eyes and fix your hope on Jesus because of who Jesus is and where he is in your storm of doubt. I'll say that again. We fix our eyes and we fix our hope on Jesus because of who Jesus is and where he is in your storm of doubt. We then moved on to the second storm, which we covered last week, which was stress and anxiety. And we unpacked a number of examples biblically. We talked about Hannah, the mother of the prophet Samuel. We talked about Esther, right? And we examined a number of aspects about stress and anxiety. And what we talked about last week, y'all were very spot on with our discussions on stress, is that stress is in and of itself not sinful. Stress is a natural byproduct, and in a lot of ways, we have to experience stress in order to become more resilient and stronger. Anxiety, on the other hand, well, that was a different question. And anxiety is in itself, we unpacked a stronger response that begins internally with the heart. And so dealing with anxiety, we uncovered 4 steps, 4 principles of how to deal with our anxiety. The first one was to humble yourself and put God first. Most of the time when we're experiencing anxiety, it's because we're putting ourselves in the driver's seat. When, like Carrie Underwood said, Jesus, take the wheel. The second is to cast your cares on Jesus. Why? Because he cares for you. The third, because anxiety often comes from a place of little faith or lacking of faith, was to actually ask God for more faith. And we uncovered a number of different aspects where the disciples and the father of the child who was demon-possessed specifically asked Jesus, increase my faith. Ask Jesus for more faith. It's a gift from God. And then fourth, remember the promises of God. Going back to doubt, we fix our hope on Jesus because of who Jesus is and what that says about him. Remember the promises of God. He is unchanging, and his promises are sure. When you're experiencing anxiety, remember who he is and the promises that he's made. So, by way of review, that was weeks 1 through 3. Any questions on what the storms are, anxiety, or doubt?
Okay, so you said, I've been gone the past couple of weeks, and you said you gave examples for each of the ones on anxiety. I caught Hannah and Esther. What were the other 2 examples that you gave?
Yeah. Yep, let me pull up my notes. So we talked about Jacob and Esau.
Jacob and Esau, which one was that one? Was that the first, second, third, or fourth?
That was the first. Genesis 32, 1 through 8.
Wait, Genesis 30. Okay, I'm just going to write that.
Yeah, that's good.
Genesis what?
Genesis 32, 1 through 8.
Genesis 32, 1 through 8. And that one was the story of...
That was Jacob meeting Esau after Jacob was returning.
Oh, yeah, can you get your notes?
Yeah.
Did you upload on the church center?
I'm going to.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask me for my notes.
Okay.
I promise I'm not hoarding them.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Doubt? Anxiety? Storms? All right. So judging by the title on your sheets, we are talking about depression tonight. He says with a smile on his face. So what I'd like to do is have y'all at your tables dive into the two passages that I have listed out for you. It should be Numbers 11, 1 through 15, and 1 Kings 19, 1 through 4. I'd like for you guys to read those passages at your table and then discuss, first up, what is depression? And if you flip to the other side, there's a number of questions for you to examine about those passages, specifically as it relates to depression and sinfulness. Any questions?
We're supposed to go through all the questions, or wait for you?
You're supposed to go through the questions at your table, and then we'll come back together and answer them in time. All right, have fun. All right, everybody, let's bring it back together. So, we have a passage in Numbers, and we have a passage in 1 Kings. Now, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting as I was putting my notes together and doing my research for this is that the two most prominent figures who came up frequently in my research on how do you handle depression biblically were Moses and Elijah, which this is not the first time that we've talked about Moses and Elijah in this series. The reason why I find it interesting is because who were the two people who showed on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus? Moses and Elijah. Kind of interesting. Moses, one of the pillars of the Old Testament, wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, literally saw God face to face and did not die. Elijah, right? One of the most miraculous prophets that we have of the Old Testament, and John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah, right? Everybody was waiting for Elijah to come back. John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah. What's my point? We've got 2 big pillars here of the Old Testament, and yet they both popped multiple times when coming to do research on depression. Interesting. Now, there were others that we could have dove into, right? David, for example, right, came up frequently as well. David, a man after God's own heart, has many psalms where he's basically telling God, you count all my tears, right? He was imprisoned by the Philistines, and he's like the king of, the future king of Israel, right? I did not pull examples from somebody like Jonah, right? Where Jonah asked God to kill him. Interesting parallel there with Moses and Elijah. But I didn't pick Jonah, and the reason why was going back to how we're defining storms. Jonah was in rebellion to God. He did not want God to save the Ninevites, and in his frustration with God's grace and mercy, he then asked God to kill him. That's not exemplified in the Numbers 11 passage or the 1 Kings passage. Which then comes to the question, okay, well, based on these 2 passages and why I discounted somebody like Jonah, Is there a definition that y'all came up with for what is depression based on those two passages? Now with all of that background and context. Anybody come up with a definition for what is depression? What are we talking about?
I'll throw something out there.
Throw it.
Extreme mental anguish and distress causing a lack of motivation.
Extreme mental anguish and distress causing a lack of motivation.
Not a perfect definition. I offer it up.
It's accepted. Thank you. It'll do. Anybody else have a definition for depression?
We went really simple, just hopeless despair.
Hopeless despair.
But
Solid.
emphasis on the hopelessness.
Emphasis on hopelessness. Okay. Anyone else?
Not to criticize, I would just call it despair
Despair?
as depression.
Definitions are getting shorter.
Yeah.
Can anybody go shorter than despair?
Sad.
Sad. Awesome. We've boiled it down, guys. Pack up. Let's go. It's good. Okay. Okay. Based on those definitions, sad, despair, hopelessness, lack of motivation from extreme mental anguish, is depression mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual? All of the above. Does everybody say all of the above? I'm seeing lots of nods. Okay, all of the above. And then the kicker, is depression sinful? Seeing yeses. Do we have any no's?
Say not necessarily.
Yes and no?
Yes and no? Okay. So we have yeses, no's, yes and no's. Not necessarily?
That's another yes and
Yes and no? Okay.
Same thing.
Sometimes.
Additionally,
Yeah.
I wrote down dwelling in depression is
Interesting. Okay. Dwelling. So if I'm understanding dwelling, you're experiencing depression and then you're choosing to stay in that state. So in that case, depression might be a choice. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, a little different than last week. I'm not going to answer these questions just yet. So come back in a few minutes. Because I want to tell you a little bit of my own personal testimony with this. Now, this is not something that I'm particularly nervous to share. I've said this in many times in multiple different contexts, but for some reason today it's hitting a little harder. So bear with me for the next couple of minutes. So many of you know that my story starts with being surrendered to the state as a toddler. Okay, so I was given up by my birth family to the state to be adopted, and I was a walking, talking, breathing, cognizant little person. The reason why is because my birth mother and my birth father both had mental disorders. My birth mother, as I've been told, had bipolar disorder. My birth father had schizophrenia that was drug-induced. That's the concoction going on up in here, right? Thankfully, I was adopted by a loving mother and a loving father who brought me up, full knowledge of all that was going on up in my head. And they taught me how to cope with the potential for me to develop one, both, or some other amalgamation of those traits, partly because they had known their own struggles with severe depression. That as the backdrop, there was always this looming cloud over me for about the first 25 years of my life, that at some point I might develop something. Essentially, there was a ticking time bomb that I didn't know whether it was going to go off. It was essentially a ticking time bomb given to me because of the circumstances of my early childhood and who I was genetically linked to. Thankfully, by God's grace, it doesn't seem that that time bomb went off, at least not yet. And the reason why I say for the first 25 years is because the symptoms of something like a mental disorder or something like severe depression is most likely to occur for young men between the ages of 15 and 25. That's most often when those symptoms start to rear themselves. Currently, I'm 31, so we're doing good so far. Now, because of the natures of where I came from, my origin story, and the fact that my mother, who adopted me, had known her own struggles with severe depression, there were key things that my mother and my father raised me up and made a part of my youth, right? And it became part of just how I approached stress, how I approached anxiety, how I approached childhood and just growing up. And those things were sleep, exercise, Bible reading, and prayer. These were drilled into me from a very young age. Like this is just what you do, Christian. Sleep, exercise, Bible reading, and prayer. Growing up, I had my own run-ins with depression, nothing severe, right? But there were seasons where I would get depressed. I still experience seasonal depression. That's something that's very common, I think, for most people because lack of sunlight, indoors, cabin fever, cold, dreariness, take your pick. Didn't really help with all of this going on in the background. I started college at 13 and started full-time at college at 14. So talk about stress as a teenager with the raging concoction of hormones going on top of all of this too. While I was generally pretty good throughout my life of knowing when I was depressed, generally I was pretty well adept at knowing something's not right, right? And then being able to course correct, sleep, exercise, Bible reading, prayer. This year, it hit differently for me. Currently, right now, in the time since all of this transpired, graduating college, entered on duty at the CIA, which is high stress, got into cybersecurity, also high stress, working full-time for one of the largest companies in the world, running a fitness company, working part-time as a client success manager in a business coaching company. So I was effectively doing 3 jobs simultaneously, trying to be a good husband, trying to be a good father to a toddler and a newborn. You would think that, wow, things are going pretty good. Except I was pretty depressed and I didn't know it. And the moment that I came to realize, Christian, you're depressed, it sent shockwaves through me of recognizing that I had been in a season of depression and I didn't even know it, which was different. That hadn't really happened before. Normally, I was really good about being in tune with myself. And I tell you all of that because I've made jokes about how, I had let this season steal my joy. My wife called me a grump. But it wasn't just me not being joyful. It wasn't just me not laughing. It wasn't just me not cracking jokes or trying to make other people smile, because I was still doing that. It was my short temper. It was in my inability to quantify and express myself in a way that was constructive without making my wife cry. It was in my inability to be joyful, not experience joy, but to not be joyful. Now, I tell you all this because I'm trying to be honest and I don't want pity. But the reason why I want to talk about depression and why I chose to tackle probably one of the more contentious topics in Christendom is because depression is one of those topics that gets Christians fired up. This is a hot button topic. There are a lot of emotions that are tied up in this. There's a lot of opinions on every side of this issue. And the reason why I tell you my story is because in what I just told you all, there are actually a lot of hot button issues that I conveyed in that little story that surrounds depression. Genetic components, sin components, physiologic components. They're all in what I just told you. Now, y'all know from the last couple of weeks is I like to define terms. And I had you all come up with pithy definitions for depression. And the reason why is because depression is a fairly loose term. I've gotten on my soapbox, and I'm going to continue to get on my soapbox, not in the soapbox, that English is horribly imprecise. If there's one thing y'all are going to walk away from, it's be joyful, and English is imprecise. So I like to define terms. So what is depression? I went to psychiatry.org. How's that for a source? This is how psychiatry.org defines depression. Depression, or major depressive disorder, is a common and serious mental disorder that negatively affects how you feel, think, act, and perceive the world. Symptoms of depression can vary from mild to severe and can appear differently in each person. These symptoms can include feeling sad, irritable, empty, and or hopeless. Losing interest or pleasure in activities you once enjoyed. A significant change in appetite, eating more or less than usual, corresponding with weight gain, either loss or gain. Sleeping too little or too much. Decreased energy, increased tiredness. Increase in purposeless physical activity, such as an inability to sit still, pacing, hand wringing. In case you guys were seeing me sitting up here, I was wiping my hands because they were getting really sweaty, right? Anxiety. Feeling worthless or excessively guilty. If I'm being completely honest, this was one of the ones that I was struggling with. Difficulty thinking or concentrating, forgetfulness, or difficulty making minor decisions. And this last one, thoughts of death, suicidal ideation, or suicide attempts. And that last one was a common theme, hopefully you picked up, between Numbers 11 and 1 Kings. Now, depression has several factors that play a role in how it comes about. Depression has a biochemical component. Biochemical, biology, physical. What's going on up in this thing of gray matter, squishy, called your brain? Specifically, it has an interplay with certain hormones, like serotonin, which is the feel-good, cuddle hormone. Interestingly enough, serotonin, I just learned this with the birth of my second child, when it's cranked all the way up and is outside the body, it's called Pitocin, which is the thing that causes onset of labor. Interestingly enough, factoid. Serotonin. Dopamine, which is your brain's reward hormone. Okay? Now, when we think reward, people think, oh, it's good, right? Not necessarily. You push a button, you get a treat. You push a button, you get a treat. You push a button, you get dopamine. That's what's going on in your brain. Dopamine is one of the factors that gets thrown out of whack with things like pornography use. It's your brain's reward center. Or norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline. So biochemical component. There's also a genetics component. Research has shown that genetically, when you say genetically, you mean DNA, there is a predisposition in certain individuals towards having depression, particularly with somebody with like my background. There's a genetic disposition to it. Doesn't mean it's always going to rear its head, but it means that I'm disposed to it. There's also an element of personality. People who just by their nature seem to have low self-esteem or seem to be easily overwhelmed by stress. We're going to come back to stress in a second. Or who just by their nature may be generally pessimistic. And then lastly, we have an environmental factor. This is where you have nature versus nurture. For individuals who have come up in an environment of abuse, violence, trauma, neglect, or individuals who have experienced violence, abuse, trauma, neglect. Think like PTSD, okay? Depression has an environmental factor as well. Now, secularly, and I got to be very clear on this, secularly, I'm not talking biblically, okay? How the world looks at depression. There are a number of things that are used to treat depression. The first one is therapy, talking to somebody. Specifically, somebody who hopefully has training and can help equip you with skills to handle the biochemical, genetic, personality, or environmental factors that are causing your depression to rear its head. Probably the more common one, how does the world treat depression? Starts with an M. Medicine, medication. What's the more popular one that's come about since the 1980s? Anybody know? SSRIs. Prozac, Zoloft. SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It deals with the serotonin in your brain. These are chemicals that are designed to help correct the serotonin biochemical hormone balances that are going up in your brain. And then the last treatment, I left off electroshock therapy. We're not going to talk about that one. It was specifically noted, this is used in extreme cases. Self-help treatment, things like regular exercise, good sleep, healthy diet, avoiding alcohol. It's how the world says, hey, talk to somebody, maybe get some medication, don't drink alcohol. You'll be fine. That's how we deal with depression. Now, what's crazy about depression is we've actually seen a massive uptake in the last several decades in the number of people who are reporting that they experience depression. Now, part of this could be culturally of like, hey, like it's okay to talk about depression now, whereas beforehand it was more taboo. Sure. But we are seeing an uptake in people who are reporting that they are dealing with depression. And the reason why is depression exists on a spectrum. I was hearing one of the tables talk about, can you experience depression for a day? Or if in that case, are you just sad? And if you're just sad, what's the difference between being sad and being depressed? Can you experience depression for a day? Or does it have to be a prolonged element? In that definition I gave you from psychiatry.org, there was actually no discussion about length of time. There was actually no discussion about that. It was all about the symptoms of what you're experiencing and the intensity of those symptoms. Now, this issue is a charged issue among Christians. Because, can I get somebody to look at Philippians 4:4? I have two verses. I need somebody to take Philippians 4:4.
I can take that one.
Okay. And Romans 15:11. Somebody take that one? Thank you.
Just 4:4.
Philippians 4:4.
I got 4 through 8 highlighted. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice.
Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Rejoice. Is that a noun or a verb in that sentence? What? Verb. It's a command. Rejoice. It's a choice. Okay? Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Romans 15:11.
And again, praise the Lord, all you Gentiles. Laud him, all you people.
Praise. Laud. Is that a command or a statement? It's a command. Now, God is not in the habit of telling us to do things that we're incapable of doing. Scripture tells us to be filled with joy and praise. And because Jesus is our hope, Titus 2:13, 1 Peter 1:3, then to be sad or filled with hopelessness is to be in rebellion and rejecting Jesus, right? So in that case, being depressed is sin. Yes and no. Remember, the storms of life that we experience can be because of sin. Supernatural trials, or because we live in a fallen world. Again, we're not talking about Job or the spirit sent to torment Saul. And I think Job is probably the best example of depression. And we're not talking about him tonight. Remember, depression can have very real physiologic and genetic underpinnings. And when we talk about genetics, that's how we are, right? Having a medical condition is not a sin. And I'm going to give you two examples. We don't say having epilepsy is a sin, do we? And I want to be very clear about epilepsy, okay? Luke, the doctor, makes a very clear distinguishment in his gospel between demonic possession and epilepsy. Luke knew the difference between epilepsy and demonic possession. Being an epileptic is not sinful. Would we agree with that? Okay. How about this one? Diabetes. Is having diabetes a sin? Not necessarily. Why?
Because sometimes it's genetic or it's biochemical. Other times it's induced by gluttony.
And gluttony is what?
A sin.
Gluttony is a sin. It is sinful to be a glutton. And in that case, having diabetes as a consequence of being a glutton is the consequence of your sin. Would not qualify under the definition of storm. How you respond to a genuine medical condition can also be sinful. Choosing to dwell. Using the diabetic example, if you use a diabetic condition to be manipulative of others, or adopt a victim mentality, or an attitude of entitlement, then your response can be sinful. Having diabetes itself is not sinful, but how you respond to it can be sinful. Depression is not exclusively a medical issue, though, nor is it exclusively an emotional, mental, physical, or exclusively a spiritual issue. And there are other issues that exist in this exact same category, pornography being one of them. Oftentimes, the church wants to make out pornography to be purely a spiritual issue, when in reality, as I mentioned, there is a very real biochemical component that goes on. Now, I mentioned how I'm a fitness coach, okay? So we're not going to get away from talking about the physiology here. But I noticed at one of the tables, there was a large discussion on how do you distinguish between mental and emotional? How do you distinguish between that? Which is interesting because in Christendom, there's actually two major views of how you view the human spirit. There's the trichotomous view and the dichotomous view. Now, I'm not going to get into which one I think is correct, okay? But at its top, in both, okay, humans are composed of a physical body, a soul, and a spirit. And you're like, Christian, well, those are three components. So clearly trichotomous is right? Not necessarily, because in the dichotomous view, the soul is a component of the spirit. So it's a part of the spirit. What's my point? There's a real interplay between the aspects of being human. There's a real interplay between these three elements of what it means to be human. What we experience physically can influence our minds and spirits. What we visualize in our minds can influence what we do. I'll give you a very clear example. Physical performance, fighter pilots, aerial acrobatic pilots, they go through rigorous mental visualization. And studies have shown that when you go through vigorous mental visualization of actually thinking through the steps before you do it, it actually dramatically increases actual physical performance in whatever activity it is. This is shown in fighter pilots, this is shown in aerial acrobatics pilots, and F1 drivers, sports, track and field athletes. This is shown time and time again that what we visualize in our minds can influence our physical performance. And not only that, breath work has the ability to shortcut our conscious minds and actually influence our subconscious limbic system. What does that mean? Our limbic system is the fight or flight response of our bodies, the interplay with our amygdala. Did I write it down? Nope, I didn't write it down. Particular glands in your brain, okay? Amygdala being one of them. What's important about that? The amygdala is responsible for how we perceive stress and anxiety. Breath work, actual conscious controlling of your breath, has the ability to shortcut your conscious system and actually influence your subconscious system. TLDR, too long, didn't read, or what's the point? It's complicated, which is why this issue is such a touchy one. There's a number of ways to slice and dice and approach it from different perspectives. Now, 744, let's get into what the Bible says. What does the Bible say? Might have to get
I'm not gonna stay here all night, Pastor. We have bedtimes.
I might need to get a guest spot on your podcast. Okay. What does the Bible say? A couple things I want to pull out from the Numbers 11 and 1 Kings passage. Notice that both Moses and Elijah were alone when they asked God to kill them.
Preach!
Physically alone and emotionally alone. Elijah was afraid. Moses was frustrated. Both were likely tired. We know for a fact Elijah was. Both were likely tired. Moses emotionally tired. Elijah emotionally and physically tired. Why? Elijah just came off of calling fireballs down from heaven and executing prophets. It's one of the most incredible passages of supernatural, just absolute obliteration in the Old Testament. Huge W. Huge W. And immediately on the heels of that, God kill me.
Ran in fear, and God killed me.
Notice, though, in Numbers 11 and 1 Kings, what doesn't God do?
He doesn't kill them.
Yeah, he doesn't kill them. Thank goodness for that one. What else doesn't he do?
Leave them alone.
Yes. And he doesn't rebuke them. He doesn't say, shut up. Stop complaining. What does he say? Let's go to Numbers 11:16. Then the Lord said to Moses, so this is on the heel of Moses saying, God, if you're going to burden me with these people, just kill me now. The Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there. And I will take some of the spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore, the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we come out of Egypt? But Moses said, the people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot, and you have said, I will give them meat that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them and be enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them and be enough for them? And the Lord said to Moses, is the Lord's hand shortened? Do you know who I am?
I'm kidding.
Now you shall see whether my word will come true or for you or not. So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, and the spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent, and so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' right hand, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, my lord Moses, stop them. But Moses said to him, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his spirit on them. And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. 2 observations from this passage. Moses brought his issues before the Lord honestly. He didn't hold back. He told God exactly how he was feeling. And the Lord responds by telling Moses to share the burden in community, not to suffer in silence. Come back to that. 1 Kings 19, 5 through 21. Elijah. It's like, God, kill me. Picking up. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. Told you guys he was tired. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head angel food cake. Wait, sorry, that's not what it says. At his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? I love it when God asks a question that he already knows the answer to. And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Assyria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah, you shall anoint to be your prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death. And the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So he departed from there and found Elisha the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak upon him, and he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you. And he said to him, go back again, for what have I done to you? And he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. How did Elijah respond? God, kill me. And then he takes a nap, gets some sleep. Woke up, had some angel food cake, drank some water, slept some more, woke up again, ate and drank some more. And then bro went for 40 days without food or water to the mountain of God. Interesting factoid, Mount Horeb is the mountain where God came down and gave Moses the 10 Commandments. That's where Elijah went. The same mountain where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. The Lord met Elijah there and asked him, what's going on, dude? And again, Elijah is honest with God that he feels alone. That's what he says. Even I only am left in all of Israel, and now they want to kill me. He's honest. God, I'm alone. I'm fighting a battle, and it feels hopeless. How does God respond? He tells them that he isn't alone. There will be a new king over Syria, a new king over Israel, and he tells them to anoint Elisha as prophet to replace Elijah. Translation, he gets a buddy, so he's not by himself. So how do we deal with depression? This is the last section of your handouts. Biblically, I think based on these passages, we actually have something of a framework for thinking through depression, okay? First, take care of the body. I think biblically, in these passages, we have a very clear example of the interplay between the spiritual and the physical. Take care of the body. Going back to what my parents told me growing up, sleep, get good nutrition, don't eat junk food. And then in the case of Elijah, going for 40 days, and he didn't have a car, so he was outside the whole time, exercise and get time outdoors. Sleep, good nutrition, exercise, get time outdoors. Take care of your body. It is the temple of the Spirit. Second, don't go it alone. Get a battle buddy. Get an Elisha. Be in community. Both Moses and Elijah were gifted with not being alone when they felt so alone. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. And Hebrews 10:24 through 25, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Encourage, love one another, be in community. These are commands. Third, be honest with God. Both Moses and Elijah told God honestly how they felt, and God didn't rebuke them. He didn't rebuke them for asking for death. Thankfully, he didn't honor their request either. But instead, he met them where they were and encouraged them and gave them a way to deal with the burdens of the situation they'd been called into. And lastly, remember the promises of God. Now, I mentioned David. Psalm 56. In God I trust, to the choir master, according to the dove on far-off terebinths, a Michtam of David when the Philistines seized him in Gath. Psalm 56. Be gracious to me, O God, for man tramples on me all day long, an attacker oppresses me. My enemies trample on me all day long, for many attack me proudly. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? All day long they injure my cause. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They stir up strife. They lurk. They watch my steps. As they have waited for my life, for their crime will they escape? In wrath, cast down the peoples, O God. You have kept count of my tossings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Then my enemies will turn back in the day when I call. This I know, that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise. In the Lord, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? I must perform my vows to you, O God. I will render thank offerings to you. For you have delivered my soul from death, yes, my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. Translation: in God, whose word I praise, in the Lord, whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid, for you have delivered my soul from death, that I may walk before God in the light of life. Remember the promises of God. Now, are we going to solve depression in 1 hour and 15-minute spurt? No. But taking our cue from Elijah and Moses, take care of your body, be in community, and be honest with God, remembering the promises that he's made. The storms that we experience the storms that we're covering in this series are not storms because of our sin, but how we respond to the storms can be sinful. Choosing to dwell in a state of depression, bringing others down around you, a choice to do that, we need to check our hearts with that one. But it's my hope that with this framework, hopefully you can recover some of your joy when you're experiencing a season of depression. Not just putting on a face, but actually being joyful in the Lord. Next week, bonus topic, we're going to talk about identity. I didn't plan on talking about that up until a couple days ago. We're going to talk about identity and what does it mean to actually find your identity in the Lord. Look forward to that one. But I'll go ahead and pray us out. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I pray you are honored and glorified by the time that has transpired here. Lord, I pray that the words that were spoken were honoring to you. I pray that they were an encouragement and lifting the hearts of everyone here. Lord, I pray that with the insights from your word, we can better approach the storms of depression to reclaim the joy that you have given us, to respond in a God-honoring way, Father, and to praise your holy and matchless name. In your name we pray. Amen.